Welcome to Unleash Podcast. Our mission is to equip and inspire emerging leaders to take holistic approaches to lead themselves, their family, and the community. In this podcast, we will bring in expert insights to enrich your leadership journey. We are so glad you're tuning in, and let's unleash your leadership potentials.
Hello, welcome to our Unleash series. Today we have a special guest with us. He's a good friend of mine named Brian Dowd. And thank you, Brian, for spending time with us and sharing about your life, also sharing about particularly the topic that most of our audience will be interested in learning about on entrepreneurship and why entrepreneurship is needed in more than business in life in those areas. Thank you.
Yeah, Baller, it's my pleasure to join you here. I've heard so many good things about this community and all that's been going on in Mongolia for some time. And so it's a real pleasure and treat for me to be here with you. So thank you. So my name is Brian Dowd. I'm an executive leadership coach. And so I'm an entrepreneur with my own company. And I also work with entrepreneurs. So my company is Next Step Coach, nextstepcoach.com. And I work with individual leaders to help them perform better, bring out their best thinking, and lead well, basically. So we have a team of coaches who work with companies and individuals along those lines. We've been doing it for 17 years. So that's my business. And in addition to that, I get to do a couple other things that I'm really pleased to do. One of them is called the Master's Program. The Master's Program helps accomplished leaders in business go from success to significance by living out their calling. And then there's a second thing that I get to play a leadership role in. It's called the Barnabas Group. And the Barnabas Group is a community of business leaders who want to use their expertise and experience to help NGOs, non-government organizations who are doing good works in their community. And so what the Barnabas Group does is it brings business leaders together with NGO leaders to help solve the business problems of the NGOs. And so actually that's how I got to meet Baller, who got to present Asia Leadership Development Network at the Barnabas Group in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I'm a part of that. And so we've been good friends ever since.
That's right. I still remember first meeting you and had a follow-up conversation here in Sacramento, and you took me out to lunch. That's how everything started.
Yep, that's how it all started. Yeah. I remember that lunch too.
It was a Thai lunch, remember that? Okay, so let's move on to the topic. And I've heard of entrepreneurship for business. You know, my background is business, and entrepreneurship is very commonly talked about in the business community. Particularly here, being in Silicon Valley or close to Silicon Valley, entrepreneurship is in the business community. But what is entrepreneurship for life? Why it is important to us? Does entrepreneurship apply to all kind of people?
Well, so let me just begin with the definition of an entrepreneur as coined by J.B. Say. He's the one who coined the phrase entrepreneur. In about 1800, he was a French economist. And he said an entrepreneur is someone who shifts resources from one area of low yield into an area of high yield. That's what it is. Someone who takes, basically where can I invest with a higher return? And we need to think of our investment in terms of our capital, our money, but we also think of it in terms of our time, our talent, our relationships. I mean, everything, thinking with an investor mindset on everything. And so an entrepreneur is someone who has the freedom and the agency to move resources, time, talent, capital, whatever it is, from one place to another. So there's a parable of a farmer. Farmer goes out, scatters seed, 4 different plots of land, and in one plot, it's all rocky, nothing comes out. The second plot, the seed comes up, and just a little bit comes up, and actually the birds come and steal it away. Then in the third plot, some vegetation comes up, but it doesn't bear any fruit. So from a harvest standpoint, to the farmer's investment perspective, that value is 0. But then in that fourth plot, there's a harvest. And so from a farmer's perspective, that's where the bounty is. That's where the benefit is going to be. And so even in that situation, what does the farmer do? Well, the next season, he's going to plant in the good field because he's trying to, invest his resources. It's going to bring the greatest return. So that way of thinking puts us in a position just to say, where's the most benefit to be had? Actually, let me just put it this way. An entrepreneur is someone who identifies the highest potential value and then initiates. That initiative, that's kind of, if there's one thing I want to convey, what's an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is someone who initiates. You see where the highest potential value is, and then you don't wait. You don't depend on somebody else, but you initiate of your own accord. You're proactive. You're the first mover. And so you initiate, and then you make things happen based on where you see that highest potential value. So there's a book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I read that when I was in college. My dad gave it to me.
Right.
And then actually, true story, right now, I just gave the book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective Teens, to my kids. They're reading it right now, and I'm giving them $1 for every part of the book they read. So anyways, it's a part of my family heritage is this book. But it talks about, being proactive, taking the initiative to take action, how we are responsible, and actually you take the word response, we're able to respond and make it happen. And that's a big part of being an entrepreneur. Not everybody thinks that way. Not everybody takes initiative. Not everybody sees a preferable future to act into. But, thinking about being an entrepreneurial mindset for all of life, that's really what it is. An entrepreneur is someone who takes initiative.
Yeah. So it's funny that about 2 months ago, I bought that book for my son as well. He's 13 years old. I decided to add a few books onto his reading list and try to help him with great, growth mindset, habits. And one thing I added in was 7 habits of most, effective people for teenagers.
Yeah, it's a classic.
It is classic. Matter of fact, one of my team members works at ALDN. He was the publisher. He was the translator of that book into Mongolian.
Oh, cool.
So he worked for Stephen Covey organization and translated it into Mongolian. His name is John. And then him and his translator both work with us right now.
Okay.
It's funny. So how do you begin? How do you know where to begin? I mean, it seems like, you're saying, we have certain, is it born with it? People going after problems, or just any people can begin entrepreneurship journey. Well, where do we begin?
Yeah, well, so first of all, let me dispel the idea that to be an entrepreneur, you need to start some successful company. Yes, that is being an entrepreneur, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just this ability to take initiative, period, just being able to take initiative. So when you think about where to take initiative in order to find the highest potential value, or not to find it, but just to pursue the highest potential value, here's a simple tool, a simple way to think about it. 4 questions for your starting point. 4 questions. What's right now? What's wrong right now? What's confused right now? And what's missing right now? You take those 4 questions, and that'll give you a really good starting point for where you're at. In fact, I just did this exercise with a real estate investment company just last week. We actually went through, we took those 4 questions, and then we did an analysis of the 5 aspects of business, or, there's plenty of aspects of business, but we talked about what's right, wrong, missing, confused, related to their pipeline, their product, their process, their people, their profit. We put that up, we talked all about it, and there's, huge insights right there. And then after getting that understanding, it's a real simple, it comes to the surface. Where do you take action next? So you could do that for any business. You can do that for any market. You can do that for any industry. You say, our local government right now, our town, our village, our city government right now, what's right, wrong, missing, confused? Just ask those questions, and things are going to come to the surface that's really informative on where to take action. I did it with my family recently, actually. I mean, it was just me thinking through my own family, what's right, wrong, missing, confused. And right now, I'm spending a lot of time with my family. And it's great. It's really good. That's what's going right. A lot of time with my family. What's wrong? Too much time with my family. And so what's missing is actually one-on-one time. And so as a result, we were able to, I've started hanging out with each of my kids. I got 3 kids, and going on just walks with one at a time. That's actually really refreshing. That's been missing, and that's a good action towards a preferable future, because we got the starting point, and we're able to say what's going to make it better. That's something an entrepreneur does. I'm going to take action to make something better at my initiative. And so anyways, these questions are a really good starting point that bring to the surface an opportunity to make something better, to add value, to take initiative, and to bring about a preferred future.
Yeah, I definitely, when you explained that, one thing made me to think is that, even local government, your own community or school, hospital, name it, every area, there's certain entrepreneurial approach you can come with. If, you also kind of tied to subject of leadership, you're not satisfied with where you are today and what you want to accomplish, and take that initiative and take the entrepreneurship kind of steps. So I encourage our audience, just don't think of entrepreneur term, just look at it only the tech entrepreneurs, business folks, they're the one entitled this. Literally entrepreneurs are people who look at problems and wanted to, be the initiator, be the person who kind of respond to that. So thank you for explaining that, Brian. So next question I have for you is, what difference does it make to be an entrepreneur in life versus alternatives?
A simple way to think of it is there's, two kinds of people. And of course, there's more than two kinds of people. But a simple way to think about it is there's entrepreneurs and there's bureaucrats. Bureaucrats are people who live within the system. And there's good reason for that. The system provides security. The system provides a safety net. The system provides resources. But ultimately, it's a sense of stability and predictability and security, a bureaucrat. So if you work if you rely on a larger organization, if you rely on a government, if you rely on your family, kids rely on their family, and rightfully so. They haven't taken that responsibility for themselves, going forward. So a bureaucrat is someone who works in a larger system and depends on that system. And there's always going to be bureaucrats, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's one way to think of, an approach, and an approach to life. The other way is to think of, an approach to life that's entrepreneurial, which you can do in a big system, you can do in a big company, you can do in an organization, in a government, you can do it anywhere. But it's an entrepreneurial approach that says, my future doesn't depend on somebody else. My future is up to me. So I'm going to accept that responsibility. I'm not going to depend on somebody else. And so when things go wrong, it's not their fault. There's things out of my control, but it's not their fault. It's up to me. And so I want to be thinking about what that preferred future looks like. So not only as an entrepreneurial way of thinking, not only does my future depend on me as opposed to somebody else, but also there's the opportunity for me to create value and not receive recompense for that value until after I've given that value, which is a little bit insecure, because that's saying I'm going out and I'm helping people, I'm adding value, I'm doing good things with a product or a service, I'm doing good things. And if people don't pay me for it up front, I'm willing to accept that risk. And I need to deliver value and then receive payment for it after the fact. So that's an entrepreneurial way of, a quick, entrepreneurs versus bureaucrats. Now, when it comes to the entrepreneurial way of life, it's accepting that responsibility for your future. And I want to introduce the word now actually of calling. What is your life about? The bigger purpose beyond self, sufficiency, being, food, shelter, family, like what's the bigger purpose beyond those things? I think we have one. I think we have a calling that's bigger than ourselves, that we're in service to something bigger than ourselves. And so what is that? Well, paint a hypothetical picture here that I think is going to actually be real. When you get on the other side of this life and you look back and say, what was this life for? What was it about? What am I going to wish happened during that life to prepare me for the next life and to make the best life of the current life? How do I do that? What's that about? That's another Covey principle, begin with the end in mind.
That's right.
So when you're looking back on this life as a whole, what was it about? Well, that's your calling. That's your calling. And this idea that whatever your life is about, it's up to you to discover that meaning. It's about for you to pursue that meaning and to make it happen, because your calling is not going to be provided to you by, a teacher. It's not going to be provided to you by your parents. It's not going to be provided to you by a government agency or an employer or anything like that. Your calling and the meaning for your life, actually every single one of us is kind of given the gift of freedom to pursue that on our own. We can't wait for anyone else to do that. We need to pursue that. And as soon as we start to pursue that, it actually opens up a whole new way of thinking about things, but it puts us in the position of agency. It puts us in the position of taking that initiative, making it happen because we're not relying on somebody else.
Wow. Just, the background of Mongolia, where we grew up in that part of the world, had strong root of communism for many years. When communism, collapsed and country opened up, I think, during communism days, certain ability of entrepreneurship and the potential of these were taken away because people don't need to create. People don't need to be critical mindset, and people don't need to solve their problems. Government do everything for you. And I see, last 20 something years, how much change is happening in our community, particularly our generation, millennial and Gen Z, younger folks are now becoming much more entrepreneurial and basically kind of building their own future. And so I could see that is even happening in my home country right now.
Yeah, I got to spend a year in 2001 as a instructor in Russia, Vladivostok, Russia. So it was, so I got to teach there. So I want to give a shout out to any Russian-speaking friends out there. Privyet and Здравствуйте. I got to be out there, and I was part of a team that was kind of imported American education for that very reason. The director of the university told us that the former, basically the Russian education system was very good at producing mathematicians and scientists, but not at problem solving and business building. And so they brought us in to teach that way of thinking. And so I got to teach leadership and ethics as a way to do that. But anyways, to your point, I got to see some of that firsthand and work with students on that very thing with the request to help build out competency that the communist system did not allow for.
Wow, that's cool. So you, towards the end of it, you started touching calling. So this is very important. So how do you identify your calling?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, right? What is my calling? What's your calling? And how do we pursue that? Well, I think calling is something that we don't manufacture. It's something that we discover. I believe we're all unique, right? I mean, there's no two people that are the same. Everyone is unique. And we've got, God-given distinctives about us that we don't have control over. And so what we want to do is to discover what those are and put those into play. Well, there's three different aspects to calling, as I understand it. And it's all based on who we are and how we're designed to be. But there's passion, which is, your deepest passion, your deepest energized state. What does your heart really sing for and have energy for, passion? Secondly, your potential. What are you best at? What is your highest potential? What's the highest and best use of all that you've got in terms of your talents, in terms of your experience, in terms of your expertise? Every single one of us has a unique mixture that makes us very good at something, but it's different for every single one of us. So calling is the convergence of your passion, your potential, and then the third one is purpose. What's your purpose? The thing that's bigger than yourself that's worth sacrificing for. What is that? So calling is made up of, getting in tune with that which gives you the most emotional animation, which could be something that breaks your heart. You say, I don't want to see that happen. I can't sleep at night because of this. And so I'm impassioned about that. Or it could be something that, this makes my heart sing. I'm so enthused. I'm so excited about that. Passion. Think of it, compulsion. What are you compelled by? Potential is what you're the very best at. And purpose is that thing beyond you that is worth serving even at a sacrificial level. And when you're able to identify where those three things come together, we're able to see those things empower you to do things that you wouldn't otherwise do. And again, it comes all back to initiative. No one's going to do that for you. You got to take initiative to identify what those are. And then even after you identify those, take the initiative to engage those things and make those things happen.
So I hear the term sweet spot always, people finding their sweet spot. It's exactly those three circles you're talking about. It's intersecting. So, in your life, you work as an executive coach and you work with a lot of successful people who are business owners and entrepreneurs and leaders in our community. So when you see those people, the ones that found their sweet spot and found their calling, certainly their life quality is different than others, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's the passion and the energy, there's the motivation, there's the reason of why they get out of bed in the morning. All those things are going for them. And so, and one of the, kind of another underlying thing that I found that I think is validated in place after place is the idea of pursuing joy. That's the reason to pursue calling. Joy. There's joy in your calling. And I believe that it is better to give than to receive. And I heard there's an organization called Generous Giving that had the phrase that has stuck with me. They say you've never really met somebody who's unhappy and generous. You've never met anyone who's unhappy and generous, because if you're generous, that gives you joy. I found that to be true for myself. And another, I think this fits with our theme of entrepreneurial living here. Generosity is an act of initiative. It's giving. It's giving. And so the idea of, giving to others, to find joy in that, how do we do that? But I mean, that's a great pursuit. Happiness is based on our circumstances. We can be happy because our team won the soccer match. We can be happy because we got, we achieved something. I mean, and that's all legitimate. Like, yeah, we get happy. But there's a deeper underlying joy that goes beyond our circumstances. But that comes from things like right relationship, being generous, pursuing the things that have deep meaning to us. And then you go back to the question of calling. Where's joy in call, or you're going to maximize joy in calling, if you will, when you're operating from a place of deep passion, great potential, and meaningful purpose. When you have those going, that's actually an expression of you as a gift to the world. And so, by the way, you can do that with your kids, you can do that with your neighbors, you can do that with friends, but that's also a really good business philosophy. Where what you're doing is you're giving your best stuff to people as a way, as an act of generosity. And then that's where the entrepreneur is giving away, the value is received, and then that value is recompensed. And that's actually the business philosophy that I'm trying to, build my business on. Add value, do it in a way that's enjoyable, and then let them receive that value, and then they pay me for it. I mean, that's what we're trying to do here. So joy is kind of the bottom line, what we're all after, but recognizing that joy, different from happiness, joy comes from, it's better to give than receive, add value, it'll come back, and building a whole way of life around that.
Yeah. Every business starts with customer, you need to take care of customers' need and value. And as return, certainly, they want to compensate your effort and service and product. So many of audience probably listen to this and wondering, hey, what kind of books and resources I can look into to learn about calling, learn about purpose, learn about passion, or even learn about entrepreneurship for life? Do you have any resources and books that you recommend for our audience?
All right, so here's the classic, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. That's one of them. It's been important to my family. It's becoming important to the LinkedIn family. I mean, that's a classic. Talked about the importance of your potential. What's your greatest potential? How do you know what you're best at? Here's a book that's been really helpful for me. I use this with a lot of clients, Strengths Finder 2.0. Not only does it describe strengths, but it has a nice assessment in there to identify your top 5 strengths out of the pool of talents that they've researched. They've got 34 they've identified. Another really good book on entrepreneurism, or the way of thinking behind it, is the 80-20 principle by Richard Koch. The idea that not all fields that you farm are going to produce the same fruitfulness in return. And so how to identify those, and actually the 80-20 principle is the idea. A guy named, what was his name? Someone Pareto. Anyways, a Pareto, an Italian economist. Italian? My details are getting foggy. But a guy, a long time ago, he was looking in England, I believe it was, to say who has the resources in the land of England. And he found out that 80% of the resources were possessed by 20% of the people. And so he then said, well, that's really interesting. How come so few people have so much influence? And he looked at other lands and he found the same to be true there. And then actually, as he looked and he applied it to other things beyond just distribution of wealth, he found that there's this strange relationship that 80% of the output comes from 20% of the input. And I think that's true in our work life also, our business. If you're in sales, 80% of the volume of sales is based on 20% of the items sold. You have your best sellers, and that produces an enormous amount, a disproportionate amount of the sales that are done. So same thing can be applied to our time. 20% of our time produces 80% of the results that matter to us. And you could even think back on this week and you say, what are the things that really mattered this week? What are the 3 things that mattered most this week? 1, 2, 3. And then the rest of it, do you even remember what that was? Probably not. That's the 80% you forgot. 80% of time that you forgot, and 20% of your time produced 80% of what you remember. So anyways, the idea of pursuing the 80-20 principle, where's the highest yield on the investments you make with your talent, with your time, with your money. So that's a really good entrepreneurial way of thinking about everything from business to time to relationships to calling, contribution, generosity, all of that. That's really good. And then, Ballerhu, I've got one more book to suggest, How the Best Get Better by Dan Sullivan. This is for entrepreneurs and how to, for accomplished entrepreneurs and how to get even more effective at what they're doing. That's been helpful for me. I mentioned earlier, I teach a thing called the Master's Program that helps business leaders go from success to significance. There's an online version of that. You can find that at masters.life. And so that might be something of interest as a resource as well. There's free resources on there. There's also, paid access available, but that might be something, that you're interested in.
Well, Brian, thank you for your time. Any last word for our audience?
I get excited about entrepreneurism, especially as it's applied to just leadership for all of life, the entrepreneurial mindset. And from what I know about, Mongolia, the opportunity there is tremendous. I think about all of the potential that exists, all of the good works that are not yet done or even begun. There's so many opportunities. There's so much potential value. And so, the idea of this audience, of you as a listener thinking about, where can you add value? Where can you identify action to take? That's the path to, a better community, a better nation, a better world. And from what I've seen from afar, what I've heard, there's a lot of that kind of initiative. And so I think that there's a tremendous, I think there's already some momentum from what I gather. And I believe that there's even more possibility for potential value, for potential betterment of what's going on. And isn't that what we're all here for anyways, trying to create a preferred future for ourselves, for our children, all of that. So so anyways, I wish you all the best on your entrepreneurial initiatives.
Yeah, that's another part of the reason I love developing nations. There's on infrastructure, future, business, entrepreneurship, leadership, all these subject that I deep into my heart and matters to me, that it's not built yet. That's for a millennial or a young person like me. I want to be part of that. I want to be part of painting my future, not only for our generation, for my kids, and for future to build build our country together. And that's a pretty exciting journey to be. Thanks again, Brian, for taking time, sharing your wisdom and sharing your experience, and being our guest today.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you, Ballerhu.
Yeah, audience, would love to see you next round on our weekly podcast or webinar series. Please follow on us on our Facebook, on our Instagram, on our YouTube channel, but also on our podcast. See you around. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Unleash podcast was brought to you by Asia Leadership Development Network. In this podcast, we will discuss topics related to leadership, personal development, family, mental and emotional health, business entrepreneurship, organizational and community leadership, and more. For a better tomorrow, we strive today. Thank you for joining us.